Welcome, I'm Darren, and today I want to talk about addictions with cards. Specifically, I want to talk about my own personal addictions. And this is going to be a part one, so I'm going to do more than one video talking about this. In this video, I just want to talk about my own personal journey with being a card addict. And I like to refer to myself as a non-recovering card addict. It's a fun term to use. It's kind of funny and quirky, but it's also very, very true. I confront the issue of whether it's addiction or obsession. Where it lies in all that, I don't know. But what I can tell you is that addictions, obsessions, these things all have some strong similarities, which are the core of what I'm talking about here, which has to do with getting hyper-focused to where you can't keep track of what's going on around you. And so that's really the key to what I want to talk about. And I could also subtitle this video as "The Reason I Have Long Fingernails," which, spoiler alert, does not have to do with substance abuse. The thing about my fingernails is that was the first addiction that I ever ran into, which was, as a kid, I used to pick my fingernails until they bled, which is, it sounds stupid because it is stupid, but that's the problem, is I was always drawn to messing around with my fingernails, just constantly trimming them. Well, I shouldn't say trimming them. It was custom trimming, if you will, and I knew that it wasn't good, but I could never stop it. And there was a point where I finally, remember, I'm a kid, I got to the point where I realized I have to figure out how to stop this. So my first New Year's resolution was to stop picking my fingernails, and it was a lot of work to do. And I managed to succeed. I had to stop cold turkey, just abandon it, let my fingernails be, and they kind of maintain themselves. They break off at their own rate, and so I didn't have to ever worry about dealing with my fingernails ever again, with the exception of this. I knew how all-consuming it was when I was caught in it, and I knew how much work it took to stop it. And I never wanted to get back to that, and so I have always, ever since, because I was so young when I realized it, it's always been this almost a fear sitting right behind me where I just don't want to go back to that. And so anytime people talk about trimming my fingernails, my thought is, no, I don't want to even mess with it. I don't want to even tempt it. So that is why I stay away from it, because of the fact that I do get how powerful it can be. As stupid as it seems, I do understand how powerful it is and how hard it is to quit. So that happened. Eventually, I started collecting cards, and we didn't have much money, so all of my clothes came from the thrift shop. So I nickeled and dimed my early card collection, and I'm pretty impressed with what I was able to build over the first couple of years. But then in high school, I started to get some money, I got jobs, and by the end of high school, I was actually working for my dad, doing some really good work. So I was making quite a bit of money, obviously for college, and I was able to siphon a little bit of money off for cards. Sort of. And I didn't really notice a problem, with the exception of I would go into the bank and I started to notice that the tellers at the bank, they were getting to know me. And because at the time I didn't have a credit card, everything was cash. How do you get cash? You go to the bank, you check out, you get cash out, and then you have $40 to spend on whatever. And so because I kept going into the bank to get cash to buy cards, I started to notice that the repetition of that was pretty dangerous. And I wasn't really doing a good job keeping my books either, so I wasn't paying attention to where I should have been financially or how much of my paycheck was getting wasted on cards. And it was a blissful time until one day my car died. And I was already in college at this point, and I suddenly realized it was a shocking moment where suddenly I was hyper aware of what had happened. I knew about how much money I had in the bank, and I knew that was not how much should have been in there. I had to go to my dad and ask for money. And remember, my dad's my boss. He knows exactly how much money I'm supposed to have. I'm supposed to have thousands and thousands of dollars for college. Instead, I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And I had to come to him and say, I need to borrow money to buy a car. And he said, well, just take money out of the college fund. I only have $700. And his eyes got huge. And he asked me, where did the money go? With addictions, usually or often you have to have an intervention. And interventions are, the whole point of an intervention is to wake a person up so that they see the problem. My intervention was when I realized I had to go to my dad and explain what had happened. There was no way around it. That was a very shocking moment for me where I realized I had blown thousands of dollars. And what I'd been doing was everything was an exception. I would go in, oh, I need this. Okay, I need that. I'll get around to saving soon. That'll happen down the road. That'll be happening at some point. And I justified everything, and it was a big mess. And when I watched the movie Confessions of a Shopaholic, I watched that and I go, I feel you, sister. I totally get that movie, because that's very much what the case was for me. I was so hyper-focused on all of these little exceptions that they added up to be absolutely overwhelming. So now I had to obviously pay back my dad for borrowing money for the car, but I also had to start to retool how I spent money down the road, how I could save money, how I could make sure I didn't get in trouble, how I could afford to make the payments that I needed to make for whatever I needed to make. And it was a constant evolution as I was trying to understand how to make this work. I would suddenly discover new things I had to work on, new things I didn't know to look for. And it was quite a process that happened up until I finally finished community college and moved on to get my master's degree in architecture, which was a 6-year program. And here I went away to the South. And where I went in the South, there was no such thing as sports. There was UGA football, there was NASCAR racing, and there was golf. That was it. There were no card shops, so I didn't have the temptation of buying cards. I could get some cards here and get some cards there, but for the most part, my card collecting went on, not quite on autopilot, but it was very, very low. But I did start to discover NASCAR and golf cards, and so I was collecting some golf cards, collecting some NASCAR cards, and it was kind of low and not too big of a deal. And then eventually I graduated, came back out here to California, down here to Southern California, and I got a really, really good job. So now I've got a really good income, and that collecting started to build up a little bit more and a little bit more, and before long I realized, okay, I'm back in this. And I'd taken the checklists I'd had before, I'd expanded them out, and I was really getting into it. And every once in a while, I would run out of money. And after a while, I started noticing I've been eating a lot of rice because I just can't afford groceries. And I realized I'm back in it. The addiction is back and it's full, and I have a really good job, and I'm running out of money. And so I had to retool again, and I had to sit down and figure out, okay, this is a problem. This is something I can't just automatically manage. It's not something that I can completely control. This is something I have to work with. Is it worth it? That was the big question I had to ask. Is it worth it to continue with this? And I basically sat down, looked over my life, and said, okay, I could stop collecting and buy a house. I could start a family. There were different things I could do. Well, I'm not really a people person, so a family probably wasn't going to be happening anyway. Buying a house, well, in terms of how my life was, that didn't really make sense. But then there was also the question, what am I going to do with in general with my life? And I came to the conclusion that card collecting was worth it for being my life. And as you can tell, it is my life. It literally is. So, okay, if I am going to pursue it, I've got to figure out, how do I move forward with it? And I began the process of constructing a whole forward approach to managing cards, managing money, and to how to budget for purchasing cards, how to figure in not just the general life expenses, but also make sure that if a crisis happens, that I'm able to manage that. And so I had to work with all these details, but the big thing was I had to learn to find the indicators, the warning signs of when a problem is going to happen. Because can you manage an addiction? Technically, yes, but it's really difficult. And the most important thing is you have to be honest. You absolutely have to be honest with yourself. If you're not going to make it. Being honest with yourself is understanding, I'm not good enough at this. I need to keep making progress and evolving it and finding the mistakes that I make and understanding that there are times when I have to step back and walk away and say, I blew it. And I have to regroup. I have to retool. I have to learn. I have to grow. And I have been constantly doing that. It's almost like a marriage. A good marriage, a healthy marriage is one where it's work for both people. And that's basically what I'm in. This is a situation where I have to work to make sure that I don't cause any more of a problem than I already am. And it's been, I'm not going to say that I've been doing great at it. I'm not even going to say that I'm doing good at it. I am doing manageably well. And that's kind of worrying. Now, I have been managing pretty well overall. It's in terms of shifting over to this project. The project I'm working here with this video or with this channel is it's a great project to take on. It's very noble. All of that is really wonderful. But I've been very glad that as the card prices have been soaring up, I have not been making stupid purchases. If I needed, say, the 1989 Santa Claus Pro Set card, early on, I could have bought one of those for $40 back when I was getting the channel started. I didn't. Now it's going to cost me over $100 because I still haven't gotten one. But I don't look back and say I should have spent the $40 because I couldn't justify it at the time. When I did the action-packed baseball movie, I had the opportunity to spend $170 and get almost everything else that I needed to finish the video. I couldn't justify it at the time. By the time I could, it was gone. It cost me probably $250 to do the same thing. I don't look at that as $70 wasted. I look at that as stupid money that we shouldn't have to be paying because right now there's a big bubble that's going on. But at the time when I couldn't justify it, I didn't make the mistake. I am constantly working to make sure that I don't get myself in trouble. But it's not really a healthy way to live. So it's what I've accepted, and it is working well enough. So it's going well. But I had to make that decision myself. I had to sit down and decide, is this worth it? What's my forward path going to be? Because it can take you over in a heartbeat and completely alter your life. We already have a situation where it's a well-known story about a YouTuber who's all into cards, whose family left him. And in one of his videos, he made it very clear what his priorities were. Not only was it that cards were more important, but worthless cards were more important than his family. And that's not good. If you go out and you make a commitment to a relationship, you make a commitment to raising a child, those have to be the primary focus of your life. And if that changes and it becomes some frivolous little thing on the side, that is a huge warning sign. These are the kinds of things you got to make sure that you don't run into, that you don't find yourself in a trap of, it's one thing to lose all your money. It's another thing to lose your life. So these are things that I want to talk more about in the upcoming video. I want to get more into the nuts and bolts of living with an addiction or an obsession or whatever it is, because it is a big process. And part of the reason I want to do that is in my life, I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've gone through ups and downs, and I've learned a lot about myself in the process. It took 5 years until I got to the first crisis point where I had to reflect on my life and look at what was going on. Well, for most of the people who are really engaged in cards right now, they've only been in the hobby for 2, 3, sometimes 5 years. And some of these people, they were in the hobby way back and they got back in, and they think that means that they know what's going on. They have no clue. They've only really been in the hobby for 5 years, which is nothing. All they've been involved with was one slide, one upward tilt of the hobby. And they haven't had any actual experience yet. And yet they're out there making very clear decisions for everybody else, guiding people down the road, but they don't know what it's like to go down the road. They have no idea what it's like to wake up one day and go, whoa, what happened? Not just with the industry, not with the expense of the industry, but with yourself, where you wake up one day and you look and you realize you're in a place you didn't expect to get and you don't want to be there. You're in a bad place. That's what we need to prepare people to make sure they don't run into. There are a lot of people right now who are out saying there's too much negativity, we don't need negativity, we need positivity. If that's your attitude, you need to get out because you are in trouble. Negativity is not a problem. it is an opportunity to reflect. If somebody has a counterpoint and is saying, look, there's an issue you need to pay attention to, pay attention to the issue. Maybe it's not an issue, but pay attention to it, listen to it, think about it, and make sure you're not running into some big crisis. And right now there is too much, there's a party going on. At some point the party ends, and what's left over after the party? Hangovers and a big mess to be cleaned up. That's basically it. And if you're stuck with a massive hangover that is crippling, that's a problem. You need to be able to avoid those kinds of things. And so what I'm hoping to do with these videos is, this isn't going to be some big class where I'm going through all of these special things where you have to do this and have to do this. I'm giving you advice. That's what I'm going to be doing. But what I want is for people who haven't had the opportunity to really step back and look at the industry, because they haven't had either the experiences nor the interactions to really understand what to look for. I want to give at least some pointers for you to look and see, oh, okay, I need to make sure that I'm ready. Starting with, what do you want in cards? And I'm going to go through some other things as well. But I'm really concerned because I was not a part of the mid-'80s event. I came after that. I was in the mid to late junk wax era and through the 90s, and I got to see what was going on there. And I saw people walking away, but I also saw people who lost fortunes. And they lost fortunes not in terms of, it wasn't like the stock market crash in the 20s. This was just where you're all of a sudden looking around going, whoa, what happened? And it was frustrating for them because what they were there in the card industry to do disappeared, and they had nothing left. I love cards, and I want to make sure that people who are involved with cards have the opportunity to continue to enjoy cards. And just to make sure that they don't get so wrapped up in something else that they lose sight, or that they bet the rent and lose it. Those are my concerns. So I'm going to do a part 2. And in there, I want to, like I said, I want to look more into kind of the issues with collecting and the potentials for addictions and those kinds of things. In this case, I wanted to do more of, I guess, kind of a testimonial and just kind of give you a feel for my own journey with card collecting and the ability for card collecting to get the best of me. So hopefully it doesn't get the best of you and you're able to find that right balance and really enjoy it. I really do hope so. But yeah, definitely look out for the part 2. And thank you for taking the time to follow along with me in this video.